I must listen to you. I must listen to you with affection, with care, with attention. Because I want to find out what you're saying. But if I say, yes, I agree with you, I've heard this before, or you're saying something new which is impossible, you're not listening.
The quantum unit, if you like, the real basics of the universe, quantum physics thinks are a quark. Okay?
Right.
A quark, a single unit, a single nothing. A quark is made up of two units which vibrate.
Yes.
Okay, think of our light and our sound that we were talking about earlier on. Okay?
Got
Because they vibrate, they are pure energy, pure frequency.
Right.
But they give the impression of being matter by creating the vibration which creates a physical response.
Words, original thoughts pertaining to science. And today's science seems to be the go-to man for all the answers. But science is limited in those answers that it can present. Science deals with physical facts. And as we know, or I hope you know, that the world is based on spiritual realities. And those physical facts will always be subservient to the spiritual realities. So science is really limited in the sense that it's not the leader, it's the follower. And then when we put science in that perspective, then we might hope to garner that truth in which it can hope to reveal. So in saying all that, I'd like to read these words to you that will put all of that into perspective. Just something for you to think about. And once again, this is for anybody that actually trusts in science. And some of you, I know, trust it with your life. That is a mistake. You should never expect science to reveal the absolute final analysis on those ever-enduring mysteries of the human race. So science by itself could never be that savior we want. Being that science is not the creator, it can never accurately explain this constantly expanding creation.
When we hear, we either accept or reject, or we translate what we hear according to our knowledge, our background, or we compare what is being said to what is already known, or we oppose one idea by another. All these characteristics of hearing denies the act of listening. When one listens, there is no comparison, there is no acceptance or rejection. That very act of listening brings about a total attention in which you see the totality and the whole significance and structure of what is being said. The quality of listening is attention. And when you attend totally, with your whole mind, with your heart, with your nerves, with your eyes and ears completely, intensely listen, and you give your whole attention to something, that is when you are completely listening. In that state of attention, there is the act of listening. And that act of listening puts away anything that is not true. You listen to the totality of the thing. When you attend, there is no borders of inattention. And that act of listening is really a miracle. Perhaps it's the greatest miracle. When one can listen totally, without any defense, without any barrier. Then one can look. Then one can listen.
One of the most intriguing discoveries in modern science is the fact that there is nothing in this world that even approaches what might be called truly solid. We speak of solids, liquids, and gases. But these terms describe superficial rather than basic properties of matter. All matter, regardless of its state, is composed of invisible particles called atoms, which in turn are composed of other particles. The air we breathe, though invisible to us, is just as real as wood or metal, because it's made of the same fundamental particles. It is the arrangement of these particles and the forces that bind them together that give to a substance its special properties. If we bring a piece of steel close to a magnet, we say that the steel becomes magnetized. But what is it that actually happens? If we place the steel inside a coil of wire connected to a high-gain amplifier, and then bring the magnet close to the bar of steel, we can hear something that suggests movement inside the steel. Listen. We think of a piece of steel as being solid, and according to our definition, it is a solid. But the popular concept of what makes a solid is certainly a false one. This piece of steel, and any so-called solid substance on this earth, is almost entirely empty space. If we could eliminate the empty space in this piece of steel, all that would remain would be a tiny bit of matter, so small as to be invisible even with a high-power microscope. This concept of almost unlimited empty space within matter is comparatively new, but it is the very cornerstone of our knowledge in this atomic age. Atoms are not solid. Instead, they are tiny solar systems composed of infinitely small particles revolving at tremendous speeds and bound together by enormous forces. And like our solar system, atoms are almost entirely empty space. For the moment, let's forget the forces within the atom. Thinking only of the particles and the empty space around them, science knows no reason why I couldn't take this so-called solid steel bottle and just throw it right on through that wall. Except this, we've tried it and it hasn't worked. If I were to attempt to run through that wall right now, all I'd get for my trouble would be a good-sized lump on the head. But that which would prevent my body passing through the wall would not be a collision of particles, but rather a collision of forces, the same forces that make an atom bomb. And if it were not for these forces, my body could go freely back and forth through that wall just as though it were not there. It is within the realm of scientific possibility that there could be two worlds coexistent, occupying the same part of space at the same moment of time, each world just as real as the other, with its mountains, valleys, rivers, trees, and people. And that one world could pass freely through the other world, neither world being conscious of the existence of the other world, if you grant just one thing. Atomic forces within the material substance of these two worlds that are not mutually interactive. What do we mean by this? Let's see. Here are two pieces of steel. Their appearance is quite similar, but a magnet will reveal a basic internal difference between the two pieces. This one, of course, is picked up, but this one is unaffected. This piece of steel is non-magnetic, stainless steel. Of course, we all know that other metals, such as brass or aluminum, are not affected by the magnet. But a ring made of aluminum is something else. It can be suspended in air by the electromagnetic force of what is actually a transformer. The ring being in effect a one-turn shorted secondary. A smaller ring will react even more violently. Here is another ring. This one made of a material we say is non-conductive. And it is completely unaffected.
Anti-gravity machine. And look, it's not attracted. It's just weird stuff. Eddy currents. Could do this all day. It's so cool. All right, see? Neodymium magnet, copper pipe, thick wall, type K, special effects. But not special effects, this is actually happening.
Не поднимайся. Теперь...
Here is another example. Several thousand watts of power were involved in that spark. If we replace the spark gap with a copper coil, the same power now flows through the coil. It's invisible, has no effect on many substances, but it can generate a lot of heat. Wood, paper, things that we think of as being quite inflammable are not affected at all. However, a piece of steel wool bursts into flame instantly. Did you ever fry an egg on a cold stove? It's no trick at all if you have the right equipment. This is a cold hot plate. And because it's cold, you can make it out of wood, if you like. Just be sure that there's a coil of wire inside and that you connect that coil to a high voltage alternating current source. The rest is easy. As long as we're being different, we'll use motor oil instead of Crisco. The egg fries very quickly, but the stove remains perfectly cold. In fact, if you wish, just to keep it handy, you can fry your egg on the morning newspaper. With a gadget like this, you can get up in the morning, sit on the stove, read the morning newspaper, and fry the eggs in your lap. Another example of the fact that physical forces can be quite selective in their effect. All of the examples which we have cited thus far have been in the physical realm, and of course have been limited by that fact. We can, however, cite examples that transcend the purely physical and clearly demonstrate the reality of these two worlds.
This is what it is, okay? I said empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
This is a water droplet that you're going to see. And in this water droplet, a frequency is being pumped into this water droplet. As the frequency is mirrored in the droplet, you'll actually see the geometric patterns in that droplet. Now what's happening, and the reason that this is so significant, is because we're going to do a frequency sweep. We're going to go from low frequencies to higher frequencies. And what you'll find is this. You'll see that in the lower frequencies, the patterns are less complex. And in the higher frequency, the patterns are more complex. So we're going through a sweep from lower to higher frequency. I'm sharing this with you now because Earth is essentially going through a frequency sweep. Our fundamental pulse, our base pulse that has hovered around 7.8 cycles per second, now is changing. And again, there's a lot of controversy about what the change is, and we're witnessing the change. As we go through our planetary shift of this pulse, patterns of energy must change to respond to that, just as patterns of energy in this water are changing to respond to this pulse. And we'll begin with simply the concentric patterns in the water. As the frequency begins, every once in a while we'll reach a key threshold resonance, such as that moment right there. And in that key threshold resonance, the entire pattern morphed into a more complex expression of itself, simply because the frequency changed. Now watch what happens. The frequency is still increasing. Now watch what happens. As we reach another key threshold resonance, this entire pattern will morph into a beautifully and more complex pattern of itself. Again and again. And look at this pattern right here. Look what you're seeing right here. Look at the beautiful geometry. Here is a perfect cube. There's a perfect tetrahedron, a star tetrahedron. In 2 dimensions, we've got the octahedron. Very powerful images of sacred geometry held in place simply because we've achieved the vibratory pattern that allows that in this water droplet. And as the vibration increases, these patterns will become more and more complex. You can see the pulse from where you are. Can you see the pulse actually in the water? As we go into the last set of the frequencies, what you'll see is that the entire, and you'll watch along the outer perimeter, the entire pattern reaches its greatest level of complexity, And then it goes back, as the frequencies drop, it goes back to what it was, the concentric circles, as it was originally. It almost looks alive. You know, you've been offered many times the concept that thought is vibration. Have you ever considered that emotion is vibration? Feeling is vibration. We are always feeling something. We are always emoting something. We may not always be aware of what that is. We carry those patterns with us. As we hold a feeling and an emotion, what we're doing is we are holding a vibratory pattern in the liquid crystal of our bodies.
Feel.
This chart shows a dotted line going up and down, which is the rise and fall on a daily basis of the number of people who are meditating as a group in Jerusalem. It's all on a volunteer basis. And the solid line represents progress towards peace in the war in neighboring Lebanon. And even before the benefit of statistical analysis, you can almost see from the raw data that progress towards peace, measured by reduced war deaths, reduced war injury, progress towards negotiated settlement among the rival factions. The progress towards peace goes up and down almost in lockstep with the number of people who are meditating as a group, radiating this influence of inner peace to become outer peace. When this was subject to mathematical analysis, the likelihood that this is simply due to some fluke, due to chance, is less than 1 part in 10,000, which for a social scientific experiment is extraordinary. To be able to say something with this certainty, that group meditation prevented war, that is a really remarkable finding. The likelihood that this reduction of war was again simply due to chance and not due to the meditating groups was less than 1 part in 10 million. There is far more evidence that group meditation can turn off war like a light switch than there is evidence that aspirin reduces headache pain. Aspirin reduces headache pain.
Quantum physics reveals that it's the invisible stimuli that are much more important. There's a simple quote by Albert Einstein that makes sense out of this, and the quote is, "The field is the sole governing agency of the particle." What Einstein meant by this very simply is the field, the invisible energy forces around us. They are the sole governing agencies of the particle, and the particles matter. And so quantum physics says the character of matter is ultimately determined by the field.
If we were ever going to interact with our bodies, if we want to heal our bodies, we want to create peace in our families or our communities, we must speak to the fields that connect all things. We must find a meaningful language, a non-verbal language that communicates with the stuff that this world is made of. The bottom line, the through line, is that they're all speaking about an experience, an inner experience that we have focused on our hearts. What the science now is showing is that those experiences extend beyond our bodies into the world around us, because the field of our heart is part of the world around us and connected with that field. So that when individuals can find a way to create coherence in their lives and become more cooperative, less aggressive, more willing to solve problems together, that experience is transmitted in this field, and others begin to find the same experience just because they're in that field. They're in that field. They're in that field.